He was just the guy who bagged groceries with a polite nod, the man who tipped generously at the corner diner without ever demanding attention, the neighbor who always held the door open and said, "Ma'am," and "Sir," without fail, the kind of black man that folks in Brook Hollow thought they could ignore, control, or talk down to, because they had no idea who he really was. And that was their first mistake, because the day they finally saw the badge, his badge, it was already too late to take back what they did. Now, before I tell you exactly what happened and why it shook this town to its core, let me ask you something. Have you ever judged someone by the way they looked, the clothes they wore, the job you thought they had? Because in this story, what seems like a regular guy becomes the center of a storm no one saw coming, and what he uncovers will leave everyone, from the mayor to the town sheriff, shaking. This isn't just a story of racial profiling or small-town injustice. It's about identity, secrets, and the painful cost of pretending everything's fine when it's not. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll learn what happens when quiet power walks into a room full of loud ignorance, and why you should never underestimate a man just because he chooses to blend in. Now let's rewind a bit to where it all began, Brook Hollow, Alabama. A sleepy, mostly white town clinging to old money, older families, and even older habits, a place where the country club mattered more than the courthouse, and last names carried more weight than the law. And into this quiet nest of legacy and pretense walks a man named Marcus King, tall, clean-shaven, mid-30s, with calm eyes that watched everything but said very little. He had moved into the neighborhood just 6 months ago, rented a modest home, drove a dusty blue pickup, and kept to himself. And that's exactly why the people of Brook Hollow thought they had him all figured out. You see, Marcus didn't talk much about what he did for a living. He said he worked in investigations, which folks assumed meant private security or some kind of ex-military odd job. They chuckled behind his back, called him just another black guy who thinks he's important, and labeled him harmless. But harmless was the last thing Marcus King was, and if they'd known what he was really doing in Brook Hollow, half of them would have fled the county before sunrise. But they didn't know, not yet. They just saw him at the grocery store helping elderly women carry their bags, or jogging early in the morning with earbuds in and no expression on his face. And they especially saw him at the diner, where it all really started. The Morning Bell Diner was the heart of the town gossip mill, a 1950s-style throwback where the town's elite gathered for pancakes and prejudice. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Marcus stepped in, drenched from his jog, to grab a quick coffee and maybe some eggs. He nodded at the hostess, a young white girl named Brielle, who barely looked up from her phone, and pointed him to a table in the back, right near the kitchen, even though the rest of the place was practically empty. Marcus didn't complain, he just sat down, but not everyone was happy he was there. Across the diner sat Gregory Milburn III, son of the town's wealthiest developer, grandson of the man who funded the courthouse, and a smug, entitled 20-something with more money than decency. He saw Marcus and smirked, then leaned in to whisper something to his two friends, who started laughing. Then he stood up, walked right over to Marcus's table and said, "You know this ain't one of those places that serves welfare coffee, right?" The diner fell silent for a second, just long enough for the words to sink in, and then Gregory laughed, patted Marcus's shoulder like he was a pet, and walked away. Marcus looked up at him with the calmest eyes you've ever seen, didn't flinch, didn't respond, didn't even blink, but he saw everything, including the waitress who smirked as she handed him a chipped mug and cold toast. That was the day Brook Hollow crossed a line, and Marcus started taking notes. What the town didn't know was that Marcus King was deep undercover, an elite FBI agent working on one of the largest public corruption investigations in the region, and Brook Hollow was the epicenter. For years, rumors had swirled about illegal land seizures, backroom deals, and law enforcement turning a blind eye to crimes committed by legacy families. Marcus was handpicked by the Bureau not just for his skill but for his ability to disappear in plain sight, and he was doing exactly that, until Gregory Milburn made it personal. See, Marcus had already built a case against Gregory's father, Thomas Milburn, for bribery and real estate fraud, but now he had eyes on something deeper. A human trafficking ring linked to a construction company front and protected by the town's own sheriff. And Gregory just happened to be bragging at the diner about how his Mexican workers never asked questions or caused problems. That was all Marcus needed to hear to start digging deeper, and the more he dug, the uglier it got. Meanwhile, word started to spread about Marcus. The whispers turned into rumors. He thinks he's better than us. He must be spying. What kind of black man carries himself like that? And then things turned violent. One night, Marcus came home to find his truck keyed with the word boy carved into the side. A week later, he was nearly run off the road by a pickup flying a Confederate flag. And still Marcus said nothing. He kept watching, recording, documenting, until the town's annual Founders Day Gala rolled around, a night of champagne, speeches, and celebration, hosted at none other than the Milburn estate. And this year Marcus decided to show up, not as the regular guy they thought he was, but as himself. In a sleek black suit, eyes sharp and focused, he entered through the front door like he belonged there, because he did. The whispers started immediately. Isn't that the guy from the diner? What's he doing here? Even Gregory choked on his drink when he saw Marcus calmly sip from a glass of wine and chat with the D. But the real storm was just about to begin, because Marcus wasn't alone. See, this wasn't just a party, it was a setup. Across the ballroom, several guests in tuxedos and cocktail dresses were actually federal agents, and every corner of the Milburn estate was bugged. The Bureau had been waiting for the perfect moment to drop the net, and tonight was the night. But just as Marcus was about to signal the team to move, something happened. Something no one expected. A loud crash echoed from the back of the estate, followed by screams. Gregory came stumbling into the room, his white shirt soaked in blood, not his own. "Call an ambulance," he shouted. They found something in the guest house." The room erupted in chaos, and Marcus's calm face turned to stone, because whatever was found in that guest house wasn't supposed to be part of tonight's operation. Agents swarmed the scene, and what they discovered left even the most hardened investigators speechless. In the locked basement of the guest house were 3 undocumented teenage girls, terrified, malnourished, and chained. The human trafficking suspicions were no longer rumors. They were fact, and now the whole room knew something. Sick had been festering beneath the surface of Brook Hollow for years. Thomas Milburn was escorted out in handcuffs, screaming about setups and government lies, but the town's mayor, sheriff, and 2 councilmen quietly slipped out the back, or tried to, until Marcus stopped them at the door, and that's when he pulled it out, the badge, his FBI badge, right in front of the entire room. Gasps echoed like gunshots. Someone dropped their wine glass, and the mayor stammered, You're one of them?" And Marcus just said, "No. I'm one of the good ones. You just didn't bother to look past the surface." But before he could say anything else, a voice screamed from the side. "He planted that. He's not real. That badge is fake." It was Gregory, pale, shaking, panicking, but what Marcus said next silenced the entire room. "Gregory, you know what's real? The footage I have of you and your father, in the warehouse, 2 weeks ago." Gregory froze, and then ran, bolting out the front doors like a man being chased by ghosts. And that's when it happened, a gunshot, one single echoing shot outside the estate, followed by screams. Marcus's heart dropped, and when he rushed outside to see who had fired that shot, what he found lying on the marble steps of the Milburn mansion changed everything. The sound of that gunshot split the air like thunder on a clear day, freezing every guest at the Milburn estate where moments before laughter and lies had flowed like champagne, and now it was chaos, pure chaos as agents swarmed, guests screamed, and Marcus King sprinted toward the front steps with a single thought in his mind, please don't let it be one of the girls. But when he got outside and saw the body sprawled at the base of the marble staircase, blood pooling beneath a pale, expensive suit, he stopped cold. It was Gregory. Gregory Milburn, the smug heir to Brook Hollow's dirtiest dynasty, lying face down with a single gunshot wound to the shoulder, alive, but barely. Agents yelled for medics, secured the perimeter, and shouted for witnesses, but Marcus wasn't looking at them. No, his eyes were locked on the figure standing 10 feet away, holding a trembling gun with tears in her eyes. It was one of the rescued girls, no older than 16, still wearing torn clothes, shivering from shock and rage, whispering in broken Spanish, "El me dijo que no tenía salida, al mincio." He told me I had no way out, he lied, and Marcus felt the world tilt, because that meant Gregory wasn't just connected to the trafficking. He was in it, not just helping cover it up, but actively involved, grooming, threatening, destroying lives behind the veil of wealth and white privilege, and now it was exposed. And Brook Hollow would never be the same again. The media descended like vultures, helicopters hovering above the Milburn estate as headlines screamed FBI raids corrupt town gala, but inside the bureau things weren't as smooth as they seemed, because someone had tipped off the sheriff, someone with access to the operation, someone who knew Marcus wasn't just investigating the Milburns, but building a RICO case against half the county leadership. And now that tip-off had put Marcus's identity at risk. See, the whole reason Marcus had gone undercover as a regular black guy was because it was the one disguise that worked perfectly in a place like Brook Hollow, where being underestimated was a shield, a weapon, and a window into the rot beneath the surface. But now his face was all over the news, and that shield was gone. The next morning, Brook Hollow woke up to the harsh light of truth. Mayor Clyde Pritchard was indicted on 5 counts of fraud, Sheriff Randall Deeks was suspended and under federal investigation, and the Milburn estate was seized by the FBI as a crime scene. And yet, in the heart of Brook Hollow, something darker stirred, because not everyone was cheering for justice. At the Morning Bell Diner, the same place where Gregory first mocked Marcus, an angry group of locals gathered to complain, to plot, to whisper about outside interference and feds trying to destroy tradition. And that's when he walked in, a tall, gaunt man with deep-set eyes and a preacher's voice. Pastor Eli McGraw, self-proclaimed guardian of Brook Hollow's soul, and secret financier of half the illegal operations in town. He sat down, folded his hands and said with eerie calm, "It's time we remind that boy who really runs this town." And just like that, the real war began. Marcus was summoned back to Bureau headquarters in Atlanta for a full debrief, but something didn't sit right. The timing of the tip-off, the way the rescued girls were transferred out of state without his clearance, the missing footage from one of the estate's bugged cameras, it all pointed to someone inside the Bureau leaking information. And that meant Marcus couldn't trust everyone around him anymore. So when his supervisor offered to pull him off the case for his safety, Marcus declined. He wasn't finished, not by a long shot, because Pastor Eli wasn't just another Southern preacher, he was a former military strategist who had turned his pulpit into a power base, preaching righteousness by day and laundering money by night through a network of fake charities and shell companies. And Marcus knew, if he wanted to bring down Brook Hollow for good, he had to take down Eli. But Eli wasn't going down without a fight. Within 48 hours of Marcus returning to town, his rental home was broken into, nothing stolen, but the message was clear: stay gone or get buried. Then came the smear campaign. Local papers printing rumors about Marcus's past, doctored images circulated online trying to paint him as violent, dangerous, unstable. One fake article even claimed he assaulted a waitress at the diner, complete lies, but dangerous enough to sway the town's more gullible citizens. And through it all, Marcus stayed calm, strategic, until one night he got a call, a blocked number, a female voice trembling. "Agent King? I know what they did to those girls. I used to work for Pastor Eli. I want to talk, but not over the phone. Meet me. Alone." It was risky, but Marcus agreed. The meeting spot was an abandoned chapel on the outskirts of town, a rotting building swallowed by vines and silence. Marcus arrived early, scanned the area, found no signs of surveillance. But as the clock ticked past midnight, a soft voice called out, "Over here," and from the shadows stepped a woman in her 30s, wearing sunglasses at night and a hoodie. Her name was Delilah, and what she said changed everything. "I was part of the youth outreach. We were told we were saving runaways, giving them a home, but then they locked the doors, took their IDs, shipped them away, and when I asked questions I was beaten and sent away with a check and a threat." She handed Marcus a flash drive. "Everything's on here. Names, payments, recordings. But be careful. Eli has friends in high places." Marcus took the drive, thanked her and promised protection. But just as he turned to leave, headlights flooded the chapel, a truck revved, and tires screeched. Someone had followed her. Marcus shielded Delilah, but the truck came straight at them. He fired a warning shot. Then 2 tires popped, but the truck didn't stop. It crashed through the chapel doors, sending debris flying, and when Marcus came to, Delilah was gone. Just gone. Only her necklace left behind in the dust, and that flash drive? It had been in her hand when she ran. The next day, a Jane Doe was reported pulled from the nearby river. Marcus's heart clenched, but the body had no necklace, no ID, and wasn't a match, which meant she was still out there, or someone wanted him to think that. Either way, time was running out. Marcus returned to the FBI safe house he was now forced to live in, but as he stepped inside, he paused. Something was wrong. His coffee mug was moved, a cabinet door was slightly open, and the smell of cigar smoke lingered faintly in the air. Someone had been inside, someone had gotten that close, and left without taking anything, which meant it wasn't a robbery, it was a message. And then his phone buzzed. A single encrypted message from an anonymous number: "Stop digging, or the next body won't be a Jane Doe." That's when Marcus realized, this wasn't just about justice anymore, it was personal. Someone was hunting him, and if he didn't strike first, they'd strike again, and harder. He needed allies, fast, so he turned to the one person in town he knew he could trust. Maya Holloway, a black high school teacher whose brother had disappeared after applying for a job at one of Pastor Eli's so-called retreat centers. She had kept her head down but had never stopped asking questions, and when Marcus showed her a photo of her brother at one of the trafficking sites, chained, bruised, terrified, Maya broke. "I knew it. I knew they took him," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Tell me what to do. I'm in." And just like that, Marcus had a partner on the inside. Maya helped gather testimonies from former students, flagged questionable invoices the school had processed, and even uncovered a secret bank account tied to the sheriff's office, one used to launder money for fake overtime on non-existent raids. The web was unraveling, and Pastor Eli knew it. So he made a move, a bold one. He held a town rally, stood at the pulpit of the largest church, waving his Bible and calling Marcus a devil in disguise, a federal invader sent to destroy Christian values. And the crowd? They roared, they believed him, and that's when Marcus realized something chilling. Brook Hollow didn't just have corruption, it had cult-level control, and if he didn't shatter that illusion soon, more lives would vanish into the shadows. So he planned one final blow, one televised, undeniable moment that would expose Pastor Eli and his entire operation. A secret meeting was set, evidence ready, news crews on standby. But just hours before the broadcast, something happened that threatened to destroy everything Marcus had built. Maya vanished. Her phone was found in her car, left running outside the school. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, just one note left on the seat, 5 words handwritten in red ink: "Back off. This is war." They thought he was just a regular black guy, just another face behind the counter at the coffee shop, just another man on the block walking his dog, just another quiet presence in their town that was easy to ignore. Until that night he kicked open the doors of Brook Hollow's crumbling planetarium, flames erupting in the distance, FBI windbreaker now blood-stained and a sidearm drawn, and the whole town realized they'd never really known Marcus King at all. But let's rewind just a few hours. Because what led to that explosion wasn't just about finding Maya, it was about blowing open the biggest web of lies Brook Hollow had ever seen. And it all started when Marcus realized the planetarium wasn't just where Maya was being held, it was where the entire operation had been coordinated for years, a place the town believed was abandoned but was actually repurposed into a soundstage, data server hub, and indoctrination center all in one, masked under the guise of a community development program run by none other than Pastor Eli's nonprofit umbrella Safe Future. But Marcus wasn't going in blind. After watching that horrific video of Maya, bruised, broken, but trying to warn him, Marcus contacted his bureau handler Agent Rawlings and gave him everything. The files Evelyn Haynes had risked her life to share, the surveillance snapshots, the list of donors, and even GPS tracking data from the burner phone that sent the original ransom video. "We go in together, full task force," Rawlings had said, but Marcus had already made up his mind. He couldn't wait for red tape, for warrants, for debates around procedure. Not when a woman's life was hanging by a thread and Eli's militia had already proven they'd blow up witnesses without blinking. So Marcus geared up, drove to the outskirts, and when he arrived at the cracked dome of the old planetarium, the silence was the loudest sound he'd ever heard. No birds, no wind, just static from his earpiece, until it crackled to life. "Marcus, you're late," said Eli's voice, smooth as ever, somehow broadcasting from speakers in the trees, and Marcus froze, realizing Eli had set this up. This wasn't a hideout, this was a trap. And just then Maya stumbled into view, limping, bleeding, whispering that it was all rigged, that the building was going to blow, and before Marcus could even respond, the entire structure behind her erupted in a fireball that threw both of them to the ground, the heat scorching the leaves, the glass of the dome shattering into the night sky like falling stars, and through the chaos, through the smoke, Marcus grabbed Maya and ran, shielding her from debris, diving behind a truck as the second explosion ripped through the planetarium's lower level. Seconds that felt like hours, and when it was finally over, Marcus checked Maya's pulse. She was breathing, barely but alive, whispering something about files, about names, about one person left who could expose everything, but they had to get to him before Eli did, because he was next on the kill list. Marcus got her to the safe house, called a medic, and once Maya stabilized enough to talk, she told him the name. Judge Harold T. Lansing, the very man who had been rubber-stamping Pastor Eli's nonprofits for years under the guise of community enrichment, the same judge who denied every motion to investigate Safe Future. The same judge who Marcus had seen having lunch with city officials on the day of Maya's disappearance. And now she was saying. Lansing was about to go public that he'd had a change of heart, that he'd told Eli he couldn't protect him anymore, and that was when the threats started against his family. Marcus didn't hesitate. He drove to the judge's house that night, but found the front door open, lights flickering, and Lansing's security detail nowhere in sight. He crept inside, weapon drawn, calling out the judge's name, but what he found instead was a message, scrawled across the living room wall in red paint. Too late. You should have stayed in your lane, Agent King. And that's when the silence shattered. One single gunshot echoed from upstairs, followed by the scream of a woman. Marcus raced up the steps, heart pounding, weapon aimed, and burst into the master bedroom to find the judge slumped over his desk, blood trickling down his temple, hands still clutching a folder labeled Operation Morningstar. And in the corner, huddled, crying, holding her father's wedding ring, was a young black woman, no older than 20, the judge's daughter. And the moment she looked up and saw Marcus, she whispered, "They're going after the kids next, the church youth, they're going to disappear just like we did." And before Marcus could process what that meant, before he could even call it in, his phone buzzed with a new message. An anonymous number, no text, just a live stream link. And when Marcus opened it, his stomach dropped, because it was a live feed of Pastor Eli standing on a stage, surrounded by children, masked guards, and a clock behind him counting down from 1 hour, and Eli smiled into the camera, leaned in and said, "If you ever want to see them again, Agent King, you'll come alone. 1 hour. Or they all vanish, just like before." They thought he was just a regular black guy, until they saw his FBI badge, until they saw him walk alone into the storm, eyes locked on Pastor Eli standing on that stage surrounded by children, hands bound, tears running down their cheeks while masked guards flanked them like it was some twisted pageant of fear. But Marcus King had come too far, lost too much, to flinch now. His badge didn't protect him here, not in Brook Hollow where evil wore Sunday suits and sang gospel with a noose in its pocket. And as he stepped through the gates of the old Revival Church, the one that had been closed for renovations, but was now clearly the new base of operations, he scanned the faces of every child on that stage, making eye contact with a trembling boy who reminded him of himself at that age, scared but holding on to hope. And Marcus knew right then, he couldn't let any of them down, couldn't let Eli win. "You came alone," Eli said, smirking from beneath his perfectly tailored robe. The crowd of guards raising their weapons, and Marcus nodded, holding up his hands. "I came unarmed, just like you asked." But that was only half true, because what Eli didn't know was that Marcus had strapped a signal booster under his shirt, live streaming everything back to the bureau, every word, every face, every confession. And as Eli began to preach, yes, preach, about how these children were being saved from corruption, how Marcus was a traitor to his race, how the real enemy wasn't racism but weakness, Marcus bit his tongue to keep from charging him right then and there. The live feed was broadcasting to Agent Rawlings, to the State Attorney General, to the DOJ, and even to a few brave journalists Evelyn Haynes had tipped off before her death. And as Eli started unveiling the new future of Brook Hollow, Marcus saw it clearly. This wasn't just about money or power, it was about indoctrination, about grooming a new generation to serve his agenda, to obey, to erase themselves and follow a doctrine of shame dressed up as righteousness. But Marcus waited, let the speech go on, because he needed one thing to finish the case, a confession, and then it came like the devil tripping on his own arrogance. "You think you've caught me, Agent King?" Eli said, turning to the camera that Marcus had planted earlier. "You think they'll stop me? I've bought mayors, judges, I own the police chief. This town worships me. You're just a black face they tolerate, a puppet with a badge. But these children? They'll carry my legacy even if you burn me to the ground." That was it. The line. The Bureau had what they needed. Marcus didn't wait another second. He launched forward, tackling Eli, knocking the mic to the ground, yelling for the kids to run. Some guards lunged, but within seconds the entire church compound was swarmed by federal agents, helicopters overhead, flashbangs detonating, and a booming voice on a megaphone shouting, "FBI! Hands where we can see them. Chaos erupted as agents stormed in, liberating the children, cuffing the guards, and Eli tried to flee through a back passage. But Marcus was right behind him, chasing him into the undercroft of the church where old baptism pools had been turned into data vaults. And it was there, in the flickering shadows of his lies, that Eli finally broke, trying to light a file on fire with shaking hands, screaming, "You don't understand. I was saving them." But Marcus grabbed him by the collar, stared into his eyes and said, "You weren't saving anyone. You were hiding your own shame behind a pulpit." Hours later, as ambulances tended to the children and media crews descended on the scene, Marcus stood quietly on the steps of the church, blood on his shirt, soot on his face, watching as Maya, bruised but unbroken, hugged one of the little girls, whispering, "You're safe now." The story exploded nationwide. FBI agent exposes cult ring in small-town church. Black agent risked life to save dozens of children. Pastor Eli charged with conspiracy, trafficking, and corruption. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt since his brother was murdered back in D.C. He felt peace. The mayor resigned. The police chief was indicted. Judge Lansing's files were unsealed and led to dozens more arrests. And Marcus? He was offered a promotion, a medal, even book deals, but he turned them all down. Instead, he used his own money and set up a foundation in Brook Hollow, the King Initiative, for at-risk black youth, run by Maya, designed to teach kids not just how to survive, but how to lead, how to rise above the system that tried to cage them. And 1 year later, standing in front of a new school built on the ruins of that church, Marcus gave a speech that echoed across the country. "They thought I was just a regular black guy. But I'm not just anything. And neither are any of you." The crowd erupted. Children cheered. And in the back row, a little boy in a suit whispered to his sister, "One day I want to be just like him." Because in the end, the badge didn't make Marcus powerful. His truth did. His courage did. His refusal to be underestimated did. And that's the lesson. Never let someone else's ignorance define your value. Never let their small-minded vision clip your wings. You are not just anything. You are everything they fear: intelligent, strong, resilient, and unstoppable. And when you walk in truth, even the gates of hell can't hold you back.